Ahoy there! Today we will be looking back at the nebulas that we have created in a previous episode. At the moment, nebulas are pretty useless and they have a major problem, which is we can just create 10 nebulas and that's a problem. So the very first thing we will do is to create a limitation for Nebula Creation, right? We will start with a simple limitation of one maximum nebula. Right, so if we want to create a maximum amount of nebula the player wants or can create, we actually have to save this property somewhere. This could be saved in data, but it's not really what we want to do, and that would make save editing even more cheaty, if I can say. But what we can do is use the handler, Nebula's handler, to manage the amount of nebulas the player can create, and then use, as usual, the various upgrades which are bought by the player to calculate how much nebulas the player can create. So let's get to Nebula's handler. Alright, so here's Nebula's handler. We have a simple property which contains the list of nebulas. We will just create a new variable which is max nebulas count, right? Max number, max, yeah, I'll keep that. And at the moment, I will initialize it to 1. So we have decided the maximum amount. Now we need to check if the player can create new nebulas. So we can make the button disabled when we can create new nebulas. At the moment, we will only focus on the logic, I should say. So we want to grab the create nebula method, and here we do want to make it return an error, right? So now we can create, we will return an error if the handler decides, no, you can't create nebulas because you have too many. So now our method should return an error if we do try to create nebula while we already have one. So let's start the game and check. So here I create one nebula, and then if I click the button again, I do not create more nebulas. That's exactly what we do want, right? Now that we are testing the game and looking at this slider here, it could be interesting to have a sort of indicator that tells us what are the values here, right? Both extremities. So we will jump to the Nebulas component to add those little numbers. Here in our component, we have the slider, and we want to add 2 labels, basically, on the left and the right. So we will use the usual aligning box container, except this time it's going to be a horizontal one. I do want it to be in the margin, yes. And I will get the slider in it, as well as 2 labels. Since we have now a HBox, we do want to extend the size of the slider to, well, to be extended, right? At the moment, we don't have any upgrade modifying the amount of Stardust a Nebula can consume. So I will actually choose to make the minimum to 1 and the maximum to 5. Because I want the nebulas to have a minimum amount of Stardust they attract and consume. So that just building a ton of nebulas isn't, I mean, it's a decision that the player should think about, right? Do I want to have that many nebulas because I will have to feed them anyway? So yeah, at the moment I will have a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 5. Great. So this isn't the amount of Stardust, which is in the code at the moment. So actually, we do need to change this in the Nebula's abstract. And the slider, we do need to change the minimum value to 1. So that's right, we can't assign 0. So let's check this. Now we should be able to create a nebula. And when the nebula is created, we actually should be already consuming some Stardust right away. Right, that's exactly what we want. Cool. All right, so now nebulas do consume Stardust. And what I actually want is the nebulas to transform Stardust into a new resource. And then, just like they attract Stardust, I want the nebulas to have the possibility to actually release the refined Stardust. Okay, so here we can max this. The point is that nebulas will have 2 purposes. Hiding my thumb. 2, right? The first one is to actually refine Stardust, and the second one is to actually generate bonuses based on their composition. So the idea is that based on the amount of refined Stardust in the nebula, there will be bonus effects. And at the moment, since we only have Stardust, basically the universe will generate more Stardust based on the amount of refined Stardust within the nebula, right? So again, as a player, you will have to choose, do you actually want your nebulas to be big so that you create more Stardust? Or do you actually want your nebulas to release the refined Stardust so that you can use it for other things, right? Which will come later. All right. Before we jump in this, I actually see that it's a little bit stuck together, I should say. So I'm just gonna add a simple spacing to our HBox container here. Let's add just a little 16 pixels here, a little bit more spaced out. It's a little bit weird that we do have those labels not being centered on the slider. Maybe we can position the slider here to be centered like this. Right. It's a little bit better. Actually, it's a lot better. Okay. Also, right now, the slider doesn't tell anything about what it does. So maybe we can add a little header to say, hey, this slider is the amount of Stardust the nebula is attracting. So let's do this right now. Okay, so it's a little bit better already. Now we do know what does what in this Nebula thing. We do have the composition, and here we do have the Stardust attraction. I actually wanted to get rid of this bold thing, but it's not at the right place. I did remove it. I need to remove this in the script of the component, actually. Alright. Here I'm also noticing Nebula's link, which is definitely not what we want to display. We'll change this as well, but let's start by removing this bold thing here. I don't want it. Alright. And go in the user interface to change the link. So here, yes, Nebula's link, and I just want to link from here. Right. Okay. Now, I do want to actually make the Nebulas refine Stardust. So I will use the same timer as the Stardust consumption, and I will add another process to it, which this time is going to be Stardust refining, right? So let's just take a look at the timer and how we're gonna manage this. All right, so here we do have two instructions which use this timer, this Nebula timer, and we do connect the method on consume Stardust. This is actually deprecated now if we want to add more actions to the timer. So what we're going to do is change the Nebula abstract to create a new method, which will be on timers timeout, and then call all the methods which must be checked. Right, so here we simply change this method here to bundle it in this one with the one which will come later. So maybe we can just create a new method and keep it empty, which will be refine Stardust. Now that we have created new methods, we actually need to change the behavior in the timer. Not in the timer, but in the handler. Because the handler is trying to connect methods here to something which doesn't exist. Yeah, onConsume Stardust is not present on Nebula, and right. So we need to change this to be on. Can you, yes, autocomplete this? Perfect. On Nebula timer timeout, and duplicate this. All right. So now we actually do have a new method which will refine Stardust. I don't have the detail of the full balance of how is the Nebula going to refine Stardust. The idea is that the more Stardust in the Nebula, the better the refining will be. So think about some, I want to say, milestones. If you have less than 10 Stardust, then there's no refining. And then if you have less than 50, you will consume 3 Stardust to generate 2 Ionized Stardust. And the higher you go, the cheaper Ionized Stardust will be, right? At the moment, I didn't make any math to know what the balance will be. So we will just have a simple, if we do have more than 10 Stardusts, or let's say 25, then we will begin refining. Right? So here, simply, if we do have more than 25 Stardusts, then we will remove 3 to create 2 Ionized Stardust. That's going to be the basic and first refining process that we will have. Now the composition is updating. So what we want to do is actually display this in the description of the nebula that the player will have access to in the game. So let's go back to Nebula's component to update it and add this new resource in it. Okay, we have a simple instruction here. If Nebula Ionized Stardust, so here we are checking if the value is true. Since it is an integer, again, true means different than 0 because 0 is false, right? So if we have more than 0 ionized stardust, then we start refining. We actually need to go in Nebula and bundle refined stardust here. I forgot about this one, so let's go back to the game. Right. And create Nebula and consume as much stardust as we can. Right, so now, yes, we do actually create ionized stardust as we create this. So we can reduce the amount of stardust being attracted here and have the ionized stardust actually at some point not being created at all. Well, very slower. Right. So we kind of have the almost full process here. The next thing we want to do is to have a ionized stardust release, right? Okay, so here I'm actually going to keep the same values, allowing the nebula to release up to 5 and always be releasing at least 1 ionized stardust. However, we have this connection here on the slider, which is not what we want. We do actually want to remove this signal here. Disconnect this. All right. Maybe we can rename the sliders. Right, we have renamed a few nodes in there. So let's check the script here. So we have the update slider in there. Maybe we can change this to be update attraction slider, right? Which is gonna be, oh yes, no, wait a minute. Update slider, all right. Yes, actually there's gonna be quite a lot of refactoring in there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right, so now we actually renamed everything to match the attraction slider calling. No. Denomination? No. Nomenclature? Neither. Anyway, we actually can think about how we are going to update the release slider, right? So at the moment, let's just create a new method. Right away, we do realize we're missing a few properties from the nebula. So let's go back to our nebula abstract to create new properties specifically for this new release system. Okay, so here I did something quite dangerous. I changed the name of this property here, which is definitely going to be a problem because we are now we have to change all the scripts using this old property and update it to something new, right? So here, for example, we have attraction died. Right, so now we actually need to find all the scripts which were using this. We know for sure that the handler was using it, so maybe, yes, let's see those warnings. Here we have an unsafe access. Yeah, because the data object is using this old name, so maybe we can start by changing it in data. Also, we do want to add the new property, which is Ionized Stardust. Oh, now let's just check this data object. Yes, nothing changed. Perfect. But we need to go to the handler and fix all those new things. Alright, so here I did change the name consumption value in the function name here, so we do need to go back to the component which is calling on this method which do not exist. So let's have this being attraction value instead. Yips. Right there. And we do have another error which is here grabbing this status condition which is attraction value again. Here we really want release slider dot value, yeah, equal to nebula dot release value. All right, let's go back to Nebula abstract because I'm sniffing an error in there. Yeah, here we are changing the Stardust and the ionized Stardust, so we actually do need to save, right? Just like we did save here, right? Um, let's start with Ionized Stardust. Another thing which shouldn't be a problem because we're checking, yeah, actually we're checking that we do have more than 25 Stardust. Yet I still want to make a check. Yeah, I want to make a check here, so I'm going to create a new method which is trying to consume Stardust exactly just like we did in the Stardust handler. All right, so we're going to create this method in there. The function shared the name consume Stardust, so instead I will rename this attract Stardust and simply rename this attract Stardust here. And we should be good now. Right, so now we have a new method to consume Stardust, so we do want to use it to remove Stardust in there. Right, so if there's no error, we do want to keep going by creating the Ionized Stardust. Now that we have created this method, we will actually create another method which will be consume Ionized Stardust and do exactly the same process. All right. So now we have new methods and we can do way much more things with the nebulas. Actually, it's only one nebula. Okay, so the signal composition updated should actually be called when we do refine Stardust as well. So let's have this composition updated signal being emitted. Here it is not optimized because eventually we will emit the signal twice every second. That is something we can definitely change in the future if we do want to optimize this process. All right, so now we do have pretty much almost everything. We only need to actually release Stardust from the nebula and have it available in the universe. So let's check what's missing there. The first thing we can do is to anticipate the fact that we will need to change the release slider. So let's create a function that will update the release value based on the change of the release slider. Okay, cool. So now we have this method ready. And actually we can go in the component to link a new method and the new slider to change this. So here we do have the onAttraction slider value changed, and we want the onRelease slider value changed. Right? And here instead we will call the other function. Right. Some other things we can do eventually is to have those two values here being initialized in the Stardust Nebula's handler, so that later on with upgrades we can change it. Think about it as exactly the same way as we want the maximum amount of nebulas to be managed, right? We do want those values to be in the handler. Right, so now we do have those values being hard-coded. So we can go into the component, Nebula's component, and initialize the sliders with those values instead of the values in the component. Okay, cool. Now we actually need to create a new resource, which is going to be Ionized Stardust, so that it can be released in the universe and outside of the nebula. So here it's the exact same process as we did when we created Stardust. So we do need to start by creating it in our data object. Now that we have a new resource, we actually need to create a new resource handler. So we do need to create handler ionized stardust. Yep. All right. So we have the base signals, we do have the singleton check. Now what we do want is to actually create methods to generate ionized stardust and consume, of course. All right. So now we do have the resource handler with a little warning. What is it? Property ionized status is not present in DataUniverse. Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to. Uh, so we do need to create a new entry in the universe data, which is ionized stardust. So let's do this right away. All right, so here you may already see the problem coming. We actually do want this universe ionized status to be calculated when it is created in a nebula and not when it is released in the universe. So let's actually remove the one from Stardust being created in the universe. I mean, being released in the universe, and instead have it in the refining method, right? Now we do have ionized stardust in the universe. There's just one little problem though. We do not have any label to display this resource on the user interface. So we can create this on the user interface by duplicating the stardust label, basically. Now we do have this label being here. There's one thing I actually want to do is to have the label invisible if there's nothing. So we're going to do this by having the text being displaying something different. So if we have more than 0, we're going to display the full label, otherwise we will display nothing. So now we actually should have nothing appearing here if we do have 0 stardust or ionized stardust. It's not exactly what I had in mind, what it will do at the moment. What I would like to have is it doesn't appear at first, but at the moment you have generated the very first unit of resource in the universe, it does show from this point. Even though you can go back to 0, you still have the Stardust 0 or Ionized Stardust 0. But that's something we will do in another episode. Now I'm sniffing something different, which is I think I didn't add anything in there to actually release, to release Stardust, to release Ionized Stardust. So we need to create this method. So here we do have a release value, and every time we will try to release Stardust, we will try to consume the Ionized Stardust and see if we can release it. And if we can't, then we will just release the amount of Ionized Stardust we have. All right, so let's start with the check maybe. All right, should be working. There's so many things I've changed and didn't make any tests, so I'm very, very scared of when we're gonna test things. All right, let's just try to start the game. That's gonna be fine and enough. Okay. So here we do have quantity of -1, update text. Yes, so I think, what is it? Oh, we didn't create the handler in there. Okay, that was an easy fix. Okay, next error. Wow, the game's launching. That's promising. So we don't have Stardust showing here. So let's unlock Nebulas and generate more Stardust, please. Okay, so now we have Nebulas here. Let's create a Nebula. Hooray! There's a problem, so let's check. Attraction slider is no, so apparently I do need to go in Nebula here and to have, yes, attraction slider and radius slider. Okay, next error. Let's create a Nebula. Okay, I can work with this. Go on. You can do it. Right. We're generating ionized stardust. It's being released at the same time. Wow. This is beautiful. This is nice. Okay. I think that will be it. I think we're done for today. I think we've done enough, and we will continue on another episode, which will be creating the first effects of the nebula, which will be increasing the amount of stardust being generated in the universe based on the amount of ionized stardust in the nebula. All right. That will be in the next episode, I think. So anyway, let's commit. All right. This is it for this bunch of Nebula features. we will keep improving Nebulas in the next episode, I think. Thank you for watching this long episode. I hope you liked it, and I will see you in the next one.